Hey everybody, and welcome back to the LokalFeed show. My name is Azura, and our guest, or should I say guests, today are the ladies from Girl Talk. Who are they and what do they do? They are a group of NTU female students who came together for the final year project. That project was to embark on a campaign which aims to tackle campus sexual harassment in Singapore. So now that they've graduated, what's next for Girl Talk? We've broken down this episode into 3 parts. On the first part of this episode, which is this episode, we talked about challenges going into the campaign, as it's a conversation that many would just shun away from. Impact of victim blaming culture. How can one be an ally? Before we get to it, if you want to support us, there are a few ways you can do so. Share an episode with your friends, subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, all our podcast platforms. If this is not your first episode, we truly appreciate you taking the time to sit down with our guests and with us. So, without further ado, remember, be bold and stay inspired. Here are the ladies from Girl Talk. Hi, ladies. Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, if each one of you could introduce yourselves, and that'd be great. And go for it.
Okay, I'm Danielia.
I'm Yunrong.
I'm Heather.
Okay, and where are you ladies from, and what do you do?
Oh, that's a good question.
Oh. I think maybe you can start by saying that we met in NTU, Weekly School of Communication and Information, and we started Girl Talk together. But currently, we are graduates of the school already, and we are all we all have our full-time jobs. Yeah. As for me, I can say that I'm a civil servant. Yeah.
And for you, wrong, and then what? It's too formal.
Nobody asked, man. Nobody asked if
Nobody
you're a
asked
civil
if you're a civil servant.
I mean, everyone knows now because I accidentally left my profession. No, name.
I work in PR.
Okay. And you, wrong?
I work in the tech industry.
In the tech
I
industry.
think that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, tell us a bit about Girl Talk and what, I know you've answered this question like probably a million times, but just for the sake of those who are listening and not sure what Girl Talk is, if someone can briefly kind of share with us how it got started and why Girl Talk? Why did it become Girl Talk?
Okay, I can answer how we started.
Okay.
So as Dan mentioned earlier, Girl Talk, which is actually 4 of us, including Dawn, who is not here with us today. So we started actually as a final year project. So in the Wee school where we graduated from, if you are in the PR or like ed track, which is what we were all in, you have to do a campaign for your final year project. So we're thinking about what are some topics that we were passionate about. And at the end of the day, we decided to settle on a campaign against sexual harassment, specifically in universities. So that was how it was born. And then we ended our academic leg, I think, earlier this year in March. Yeah, we ended in March. And since then we've kind of like taken a bit of a break, but we're not gone. So it's very interesting because before we had this call, we had internally multiple calls ourselves, so we can kind of discuss like where to go next with this. And we were brainstorming, we had like such big ideas. We were thinking, should we change the audience, should we do something different, should we like do it like webinar style, like where to go to next, because for us we all have full-time jobs, right? But we still want to continue this as a very meaningful movement. So how must I talk about what we're doing now? I guess I've led up to that point. Okay. Sorry. Oh yes, okay. So now that we're out of that kind of academic zone, we still are a platform, a movement, a place where people can ask questions and we answer. And still what we're focused on is trying to empower female undergrads to respond to sexual harassment. But the way that we're going to go about doing that is going to be a little bit different now. Our focus is primarily shifting to technology facilitated sexual violence. Is that correct? Yes.
You're wrong, is that correct?
Sexual harassment in a digital age.
Okay, that's interesting. If you could share a bit more about that. How's it going?
Okay, no,
How's it going
actually,
about it?
no, actually, that one we are still working on it. So like we'll be releasing more content like in a few months' time. But yeah, we're really like trying to balance between this initiative and our full-time jobs. But yeah, that's the direction we are going for, and we'll be releasing more content soon. So spoiler. And I realized previously Heather, I think she talked about like how our group came about, right? But we haven't really say like what Girl Talk is about. So actually, it was a FYP project, but basically we started this because after the Monica Bay incident and the rise of a lot of sexual harassment cases, especially on campuses, we felt the need to bring this up and to really like explore this topic because it is something that we've experienced before, and our friends are also wanting to find out more about this topic. So then we decided to venture more deeply into this to provide a place where undergraduates can find like resources so that they can seek help or understand better about what they can do to recognize and respond sexual harassment on campus.
Okay, can I just track back a bit? So actually you mentioned, right? So why is it so, okay, like when you read the media and the news, right, you don't really hear a lot of like, I mean, yes, we hear snippets and a bit in there, right? But what made you ladies kind of like want to do that as a final year project and kind of like made that happen as a movement?
I think firstly, of course, very practically, the main reason was because we just had to pick something to do and work on as our final year project. And there are so many topics, right? So maybe why we chose that particular topic was that I think we launched this year, we had our research and discussions late 2019.
September.
So yeah, so during that period of time, it was where there was actually a lot of like momentum regarding this. There was a lot of news coverage. So it finally felt that, hey, people people are finally talking about this, and then we felt that, okay, maybe we can start a conversation now, and there will be people who listen instead of people who just try to shut us out. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was more like the circumstances and everything made us realize that this is a really good time, and since this is what we have been passionate about, it's like, let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Sorry. I do just quickly want to add on. I was reminded because then I was talking about all the conversations that were surrounding this topic. So we were exploring a few different possible topics for our FYP, right? Because it's 1 year dedicated to a topic. That's a long time. And we were surfacing some of the topics that we felt passionate about. And I think naturally we ended up gravitating towards this topic of sexual harassment on university campuses because it's something we feel passionate about. But the other thing was that with all the conversations that were ongoing, it finally felt like the time was right. So I think of a topic like that, people are not always willing to talk about it. There's a lot surrounding it that's like very taboo. Even like just saying that it happened, some people are like, hey, don't anyhow say like this thing happens all the time. So there's a lot of like fear and uncertainty and shame surrounding these topics. And it was just like it was such a great opportunity when we realized that all these conversations were happening in public spaces, that we were like, hey, this is something that we can contribute to. Like 4 of us, females, undergrads, can contribute specifically in this space that really needs attention.
Okay, so currently, like you mentioned, right, that you ladies are kind of like talking about this in universities and all that. That is your FYP, right? But having that public conversation and all that, sometimes people have this doubt. Right. Okay. Whether like you mentioned earlier, right, Heather, that is taboo around, and people keep saying like, do anyhow say that and stuff like that, right? So, do you think people are more more adaptive, more receptive, or listening with an open ear, or they're just listening and then just kind of like still trying to avoid that conversation or that topic around sexual harassment? What do you ladies think?
Okay, I think in regards to like whether they're receptive to it, because we had this stage where we were doing a lot of research and talking to a lot of people. Like naturally we had to talk to a lot of people about this topic, right? So based on like our experience, I think that we are fortunate enough to be in an environment where to be, you know, like in this age where like people are more receptive to this topic. So we didn't really face like very harsh like rejections or like people saying that like, oh, this is not happening, stop spreading this kind of like lies and stuff. No, actually we were quite supported by our friends, like all the people that we spoke to for our research. Like they were all very willing to share their stories, even though some prefer to be anonymous. Many of them still are okay with sharing their stories, and are even okay with being filmed, you know, because we have this like collective want to like spread this message. So I think at this point, yeah, people are still pretty receptive. However, I think sometimes online, you know, when people share certain things, sometimes it may be taken out of context. So then it makes it harder for us to spread the message, because some people may say like, oh, you know, like this happens to guys also, like why are you like, you know, focusing so much on girls? Like, are you like ignoring the fact that this happens to other people as well? Or like, you know, some people may think like, oh, why are you telling girls what to do? Like, you know, it's not their fault, but actually that's not our intention. So sometimes the words get twisted a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, so I remember we had a lot of uncertainty when we were going into the topic, right? Because at that point in time, we were thinking, okay, who can support this campaign? Are there experts who will be willing to speak to us? Or are there people who will be willing to sponsor certain materials, or you know, just like help us out? And I remember we had a lot of uncertainty surrounding that, because we were coming from an academic institution saying that we wanted to talk about sexual harassment in the academic institution. And because of that, we were very careful about the way we approach or phrase certain things with the school. And when it came to online, it was exactly as Yunrong said, we were very cautious about how we phrase things, because okay, so the special thing about our campaign, right? There are so many campaigns about that are anti-sexual harassment, right? There are so many campaigns that are about sexual violence and prevention of sexual violence. But what makes Girl Talk stand out, and why we specifically chose this stance, is that Girl Talk really focuses on equipping people, female undergrads in this specific case, with the skills or abilities to respond to harassment. So whether it's verbal or physical, it really gives them the framework to, it's not just say no and run away, you know, it gives them the framework to think, to consider like, okay, what are my boundaries, what am I okay with, what am I not okay with, in terms of like, let's say being touched or something being said to me, or even when I'm in this situation, what is it that I feel comfortable saying? If I don't feel comfortable speaking, what else can I do? Can I gesture with body language? How do I go about doing that? We felt like, you know, all these things are so important, because when you're in the moment, so many people, they freeze, right? They are scared, they are uncertain, they don't really know what to do. And because of that, when it's past, they tend to think like, hey, you know, this is like my fault, because like I didn't react, I didn't respond, or I didn't know what to do. And we really, really, really wanted to stop hearing stories like that, which is why we chose this angle. But precisely with this angle, we were very scared that people would feel like we were mandating, you know, like, oh, this is what you have to do, this is the correct thing to do. When I think more of what we were doing is making suggestions or encouragements. So there, as like with a topic that's controversial, you're kind of scared to speak too loudly about it. And with a topic that is sensitive, you are scared to speak too strongly about it. But we had to do both, you know, speak loudly and speak strongly. At the end of the day, I feel like we discussed a lot with each other, as well as with experts. And I'm so glad that we did, because I think that what we did really managed to help lots of people. Yeah, like it's simple sometimes, like it's our friends who say things to us, like, okay, like my sister, she told me the other day, because somebody was telling her that she was getting harassed on a platform, and then my sister was like telling this girl, oh, what she can do, or how and like telling her that it's not her fault. And then after that she said, hey, you know, I wouldn't have known any of this if not for your campaign. Like this has just brought it to my awareness, this has helped me to understand better. And I think like that's what we do it for, just to touch maybe not like the 10,100,000 people out there, right, who don't yet know our content, who are not in tune, or who are even like disagreeing loudly with us, but for the people who it reaches, I think it's really nice to know that it makes a difference to them and that it helps them figure out where they stand on this topic, as well as how they can help and protect not only themselves but others.
I think that's very important.
Okay,
I think
so I
Yeah.
talked a lot.
you actually answered a lot of my questions, but you just
Yeah, actually I wanted to add on to what like Heather said as well, was that I think in the beginning when we started on this, it was a bit worrying that it would be seen as disempowering, that we are teaching the, so like we call them survivors, like we're teaching like girls to protect themselves, when hey you should be teaching the other people, the perpetrators, not to commit such crimes, right? So why are you telling the people to protect themselves? So we're worried that it would portray us as like disempowering, but actually after like thoughts and actually having carried out the campaign, realized that it was quite empowering, like what Heather said. Knowing how to take care of yourself, knowing how to do, like what to do in that instance, actually helps a lot. Yeah, and it really helps me in my own like personal daily life as well.
yeah, they prefer not to say it, or not to even raise, or not to even have that conversation, because there's this culture that is called the victim blaming culture. What do you ladies think about that?
Okay, so like I'm no expert in this field, but like based on like all the research that we've done and articles that we've came across, I would say that humans, right, we have this innate nature where we were, once we were born, we grow up, and then we were taught that the world is just and fair. So we've been taught this since we were young, right? So as we grow up, we keep thinking, we want to think that the world is always fair. So when something bad happens to like someone who is so similar to us, we try to like rationalize that and try to think that like, oh, okay, so good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. So if something like this happens to someone, it would mean that they invited it upon themselves, or they didn't take enough precaution to prevent that. So imagine like your neighbor, right? Let's say there was a burglary that happened. You would immediately think like, oh, maybe my neighbor didn't like lock his or her door. Or like if someone was robbed, you'll be like, oh, maybe that person was wearing like a Rolex watch, or carrying a very expensive handbag. So like it's a very like innate thing where we internalize these like norms, and then we grow up with it. So this applies for sexual assault as well, right? So if something bad happens to someone so similar to us, we try to rationalize that, when we are facing this like troubling like reality, right, we try to rationalize and say like, oh, that person probably did something to invite that upon themselves. Yeah, so I think that's how victim blaming actually came about, and it has like sort of creeped into our lives. Yeah, so yeah, I guess yeah, so that's why now it's very it happens all the time. We see it in the Me Too movements. People speak up, but then people shut them down, saying that like, you wanted to be close to that person, you were drunk, and then it's your fault that you were wearing a short skirt, right? So it's all because they were trying to rationalize that, this happened to you because you invited it. I don't think it will happen to me because I'm not doing that, so that's how people usually react. Yeah. You got anything else to add? Oh, actually, so like to bring this to like a personal experience. I was sexually harassed on the train before. I was really young. I was around, I think 17. Yeah, I was 17 years old. I was taking the train to school. So I remember it was from Jurong East to Clementi. So then while I was, waiting in the train, there was like a lot of people. It was packed. So I remember there was this like person behind me, and I started feeling this like sensation on my butt. So then I was trying to like think like, I think, what should I do, right? Like I was so young, it was the first time it's happening to me. So then I just like bet with it. I tried to like try to imagine that the train was moving faster, because it really felt like eternity in there, because it was still happening. And even though I tried to shrug it off, like the sensation was still there. I could still feel like some fingers on my butt. So immediately after I got off the train, I like quickly got to school. I tried to like blast music, and then when I got to school, I told my friends about it. in school. And the funny thing is, the first thing like one of my friends said was like, "What were you wearing?" And I was like, "Oh, I was wearing FBTs. You know, like, it's quite common if you are doing sports, right?" I said I was wearing FBTs, and then he was like, "Oh, no wonder lah. Like, no wonder this happened to you because you were wearing FBTs."
Freaking
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, and he was like, "Yeah, wear some more lah, wear some more." Like, he still said that to me, and like nobody else like said anything else. You know, they kind of just agreed with that, and we all went with the flow because at that time we were not aware. So, you know, like I think this happens to like a lot of people. So we just accept, you know, the blame. And even when we tell our parents, they will just be like, "Next time, just don't wear short shorts or short skirts." Right? So yeah, that's like the personal thing that I face lah, that I feel like we really need to change. Yeah, and I'm glad that we're taking the right step towards that.
Heather or Daniela?
Yeah, I wanted to add on that I don't think it's only like just the way we rationalize things, but actually like victim shaming or blaming is because of very like deep-seated cultural norms that especially like I feel like we are all brought up and taught to protect ourselves. You know how like a woman's like chastity, her like pureness, her virtues are very important, and you're taught to protect yourself in that sense. So when something like that happens to you, immediately they are like, why didn't you protect yourself better? And it's not a thought to be like, why didn't the person like attack? Like they don't think about why the perpetrator did it and how it's the perpetrator's fault. They just think like, oh, you could have done better for yourself. Don't go out at night, you know, don't wear too short, don't wear too skimpy, you're showing off too much skin, you're inviting trouble. Yeah. So I think it's very just such like deep-seated cultural norms that people don't even question it when they say it. You know, like even my own parents, like, you're wearing that out, that looks too short. But it's like, who is it too short for? It covers all the essentials. You know? Yeah. Yeah, okay. That's all.
You were asking about victim blaming culture.
Yeah.
Man, I had a thought, but I lost it when you Okay.
Throw out keywords. Asian, Chinese, family. Yeah.
No, I mean it's okay. I think Yun Rong and Dan covered quite a few things already, and I think it's helpful, of course. Like normally when we talk about victim blaming, we talk about it from the perspective of somebody who is like doing something that's like totally like unacceptable, right? Like it's very easy to like paint that picture, and then it's hard to see how it reflects on ourselves as well. And I think that is like the important part, right? Because perfectly decent and good people participate in victim blaming. Oh, okay, I know what I was gonna say. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say that I think the most destructive thing about victim blaming is that so when it happens with somebody that is close to you, right? The problem with it is like they always think that they are saying like what is best for you, especially if it's like a close friend, a good friend. They may ask like more questions, and then without them expecting it to sound that way, it may come across as doubting you or as thinking that like you're not believable or like you're overthinking. And how that hurts the survivor, why that is very difficult for someone who has gone through when someone has gone through a difficult experience. The reason why it's so scary to hear these kinds of victim blaming thoughts or ideas is because for this person to even speak up, they must have worked up the courage, right, to consider their experiences, to sift it through and to raise it however tentatively they raise it. And then for that to be denied, it kind of causes them to like strike it off in their own minds, you know, and it really deprives them of the ability to properly process what happened to them, as well as how it can potentially impact them, so that they can think about okay, you know, I'm aware that this happened to me and this is how it affected me, and then how would this affect my relationships, and how can I like heal, right, from this. And when you don't get that opportunity to go through these steps, it just becomes scars or just open wounds, there are things that continue to fester, and every time there's a new occurrence, a new thing, you recall the default, which is, oh, this is not like a real thing, right? It's not a real problem, or like I'm just overthinking it, and then you put it there and then it becomes worse and worse and worse. And I feel like that is the thing that underlies a lot of concepts that as girls we are almost that we are taught. We grow up and we think like, okay, when it's dark at night, like, and you see a group of guys, you won't look at them, you will like cross the road if you can, or you will just walk away as quickly as possible. Or like when I'm walking home from the MRT station at night, I don't plug in and listen to music, just so I can be vigilant, just so I can be aware. It's all these little things that have kind of taught you that, hey, you know what, your safety is like your responsibility and just your own responsibility. And it's insidious, because I mean, what I'm talking about now, right, it's like, okay, general awareness of your surroundings, but when it goes on to impact your relationships, even your romantic or intimate relationships, I think, and you are never given the outlet to even realize that there is something that needs healing, that's where it becomes very, very difficult and personal.
Okay, so the next question kind of comes in: how to be a better ally, how to be a better listener and listen without judging, or anyone wants to take it on?
I think Dan should answer this question, because I think that Dan is a really good listener.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, Heather. I would like to say that I think it's a lot of like personal also, because as a person, I try not to make judgments of how people want to live their life. So whenever anyone tells me anything, be it like, oh, their past experiences, or just like maybe they're like, oh, I really like this specific thing, and I'm like, I don't understand, I don't relate, but it's okay. It's your life. So I think it's just important, like regardless of what we're talking about, to not have judgment on how people want to live their lives, as to how to be a better ally or ally. When someone speaks to me, usually the first thing I try to do is to like sympathize or empathize if possible. So I almost always start with like, I'm sorry that had to happen to you. And depending on, because I'm a hug person, like I like to give hugs. So depending on your personality, you can choose to give a hug. And depending on the other person.
Now cannot already in public.
Oh yeah, sorry. Oh my god, later the ministry come after me. Now you cannot hug, but maybe like a virtual hug. But in the past, if someone like, I had a friend who suddenly like, I think I knew her for like 3 days, and then she told me that actually when she was younger, her parents' friends came over and molested her in her bed. And then I was like, and then I listened with like an open heart, and I just said, oh, I'm sorry that this had to happen to you. And I gave her a hug, and she actually said that, oh, like, thank you. Actually, I don't need any like advice or anything. I just wanted to see how you'll react, because every time I've told this story, people have always said that, oh, is it, oh, I mean, because like the person that she is also like a little bit more of like a promiscuous like girl. She likes to dress like in tight clothing and stuff like that. So she told me that the friends that she used to have would immediately ask like, oh, what were you wearing, or like, oh, how come he did that to you, or like, why do you continue to let him do that to you? But the thing is that I think when people are very young, they also don't exactly know what's happening, and if you don't have the right support system, you just kind of let it continue to happen because you have no idea what's going on, and you're choosing to ignore it because it's so traumatizing. But okay, sorry, back to the question about how to be a good ally. I think it's just, you need to put yourself in their shoes, and even if you cannot understand, you cannot relate, you need to at least understand and acknowledge the fact that this means a lot more to them than it means to you. When what they're trying to tell you, what they're explaining, it takes a lot more from them than it takes from you to just listen. Yeah.
You want to have anything to add if I ask the next?
Okay, so to add on to what Dan said, so I think that's the first step. So the first step is to be empathetic and to understand where they're coming from and to put them before you. So when they're telling you like their problems, don't try to say like, oh, that happened to me before, blah, 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 because that actually trivializes whatever happened to them. So try to listen with all your heart and don't try to bring your own problems in. So like that is one of the ways. And also like the second thing you can do to be a good ally is to know like who to call out, who to like seek help from. So this comes from a personal experience as well. After this initiative started, right, actually there was a survivor who reached out regarding a revenge porn case. So the person was asking like what to do, you know, like it's out there, what are the possible measures to take. So then because like I was trained, went for like the sexual assault first responder training by Aware. So then I immediately knew to call Aware, the hotline, and to let them know what happened and to see how they can support. Because for me, I've already like told the person like, you know, it's not your fault, you know, you didn't invite this to happen. It's completely the perpetrator's fault. You know, you shouldn't like feel guilty or shameful about even telling me about this, because that person was actually very, very shameful and was very afraid that people would judge, because actually it already happened lah. Like people were already judging, and you know they don't provide any help. So by knowing how to like empathize and by knowing where to seek help from, I think that's extremely helpful, because after that that person could then get help from like lawyers, you know, counselors and psychiatrists. So that actually will make a very big difference in their lives. And yeah, I think these are the two steps that I always take when it comes to speaking to survivors. Yeah, Heather, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say a great thing to do would be to sign yourself up for the Aware First Responder training, which all of us went for, and what Yin Rong was talking about just now. It is very, very important, and I think what is something about it that's also so crucial, right, is that it is specifically first responder training. So it puts the emphasis on people who are first to hear these stories. And why I'm raising this, right, is because a lot of people who engage with our content, there are people who engage because these things happen to them, or they already know, and that's why it's top of mind. That's why they want to read these resources. That's why they want to find out. But I think the really important thing is that even if it doesn't happen to you, or even especially if it doesn't happen to you, you should be aware, because if it's not happening to you, it's going to happen to somebody else who is going to come to you and rely on you for support, right? And that's the reason why like it's just always important to educate yourself, if not for yourself, for other people who you love and care about.
Oh yeah, something to add. So
Sure, go for it, Yura.
yeah, okay. Okay, so like another thing is to like always have conversations. So like even if you're just talking to like one person, you know, like it will make a change, because you talk to this person and then that person like spreads the message to another person, maybe to their families and like, you know, their whole clique, you know, they start sharing their IGS, reposting and all that. So it becomes like a network. Yeah, but basically, yes, have conversations. And I think men, both men, women, or like whichever you like identify with, you know, like if everybody can speak about this, it becomes like a much bigger thing where it will like benefit even more people, you know, like the Me Too thing. We already seen how powerful that is. So I think we should just continue this momentum and keep talking about it. Yeah, every day. No,
it normalizes it. Like when we have such conversations, it really normalizes it. It doesn't become so taboo anymore to bring it up, and people are not so afraid to like share it. Because I do think that when these things happen to you, it's such a big thing.
Yeah.
Even though like maybe the actual incident might not be, it might be quite short. It takes up such a big part of yourself that when you share it with someone, it's so intimate, and the way they respond back to you is so important, because it can like destroy you in a way, and it can kind of stop you in your like journey of healing as well. Yeah.
Okay, since you ladies are talking about having that conversation, right? Do you feel that sometimes the hardest conversation is talking to the family, the parents, to a certain extent, right? Because, okay, come on, ladies, you gotta admit it. We come from like Asian families, right? They rather not talk about these kind of things. They rather just, okay, let's not talk about it, and stuff like that, right? So how does one actually take that step?
I would, and probably would never talk about these kind of things with my family. simply because I think within my family, it's kind of reached a point where it's like, okay, we will just agree to disagree on certain things because we have such different values. My parents are very conservative people, so my mom's the kind of person that tells me not to stay out too late, like if you come back, don't come back alone. Don't dress like too skimpy, make sure you cover up. So if you know that they're this kind of people and you know that they won't be empathetic, and I don't really want to have that conversation, especially now that I'm older. I know I can get my support elsewhere. I can get it from my friends. I don't necessarily need it from my parents because I have a built support system. I'm not like in primary school. I'm not a child anymore. So my main support system is unfortunately not my parents. And I think it's definitely a very difficult conversation to have. And yeah, I think it's very hard to speak for everyone, but personally, I have not spoken and will not speak about it with my own parents. Yeah.
I'll add on. Okay, so for myself, so traditionally in the past, like I would never bring this topic up ever at the dining table. However, after we started this initiative, right, as more and more reports come out, the way I would approach this, right, with my family, is that I will talk about the news first. So I will be like, this happened to like, let's say like Monica Bay, like it's very common in universities. It's happening everywhere. And this is like before I even told them that we are doing this project. Yeah, so I would bring up the news first. I'll say like, this is happening all around Singapore and it's like super, prevalent. And then they'll be like, yeah, I've been seeing this happening so much, And then if let's say my mom starts to victim blame, then I'll tell her like, no, she actually didn't ask for this. She was just showering. How can you say that she's asking for it when she's just doing a daily activity, right? So then it starts to shift their mindsets. So typically in the past, my mom will always tell me like, can you stop wearing these short shorts, like your short skirt, you're like what? People rape you, yeah, she like to say that. Then but over time, right, I start to educate them more about this, where I got to a point where like my dad actually doesn't care anymore about what I wear, like because he knows that these things happen not because I asked for it, but because there are bad people out there, So I think you can start by raising up the news, and then you can start by saying like, oh, this happened to my friend, and then she has overcome it by doing this, doing that. What happened is not her fault. So little by little mindsets will change lah. Yeah, so that was my personal story. Then I remember also, because for Girl Talk, right, after a few months we actually came out on the news, on news, on like Vice, on like South China Morning Post, Asia One, all these like platforms, right? And also on CNA. So that was like quite a big one. So then I actually like didn't tell them at first that I was in it because I was doing this project about sexual harassment on campus, because I know that they would be like, wait, did this happen to you? Like, why didn't you tell us? Like, why? So I just like told them like, oh, we are appearing on the news, and like, just go and watch it. So when they watched it, they actually was like, they understood so much. It's actually a documentary lah. It's like Porn Without Permission on CNA. So basically like they watched it and they like, it was like an unspoken thing at that time at first lah. They were like watching and they were like, so you were actually doing this for your FYP. So actually only after the whole program ended, we just like talked a bit. They still posted like my picture on like the family chat, and then only after that then they were like, oh, so you were doing that. Then I was like, yeah, so because it's been that it's been happening a lot, right, in universities. So like this is a good way to get people talking, and they were very accepting. Like they completely didn't say like, oh no, it's like the girls' fault, everything. They were like really supportive. So I think that's when I knew like it has changed. They are supportive now, and they are willing to talk about it.
When the Monica Bay incident thing, then I raised up my parents as well. It's not like I never tried to talk about it. It's like I did. And my mom was like, see lah, don't stay in hall.
That's why you must tell her. Yeah, I think that's what happened also. My parents also like that at first lah.
Yeah, I don't really have
a word of advice. I just kind of wanted to agree with your point that I think it's very hard to talk to your family about it. And I think it's very hard to talk to your family about it, especially if the reason, okay, so for us, so far we've been talking about advocacy, right? So advocacy is difficult to talk to your parents about because you don't know whether they'll agree and you don't really want to clash with them about something that matters to you so much. That's a big one because I think it's extra painful when the people who you hold the closest disagree with you on something that matters to you so deeply. So it's not just like somebody in the street, then you're like, okay, agree to disagree, and then you like can walk away from it. You can't. You've just gotta live that way. But I also think that for people who have had their own experiences with sexual harassment, or sexual violence of any sort, that I think it's very difficult to talk about it at home because you don't want to hurt your parents, you know? Like that was a big one for me. Like before I talked to my parents about like my own experiences, right? I think actually I decided that I never would because I I I thought that it would hurt them too much. Like that it that they didn't need to know because I had already like dealt with it. I had like, processed it in my own time, in my own way, in my own space, and that I didn't need to tell them about it. And the only reason why I did was actually because of Girl Talk. So Girl Talk has been it's not only been something that has touched the lives of others. I think for all four of us, it has really touched our lives as well. Like our growth process through this project, the way we have come to reflect on ourselves, our own boundaries, or what we say, what we do, how we act, and how we can help other people has really grown tremendously. For me at home, I mean, I also didn't go into like super lot of detail when I was talking to my parents, but the reason why I did it was because I wanted them to know why this is important to me. And I think that's a real good starting point for conversation. Of course, if you are if it's too scary to jump straight into it on your own, you can totally start with like what said, right? Talk about the news, just like super neutral. You can be like, hey, like this thing's happening. Then you kind of like gauge, test waters, see where they're at. Not everything is your battle to fight. If you think that is too scary, too difficult, too daunting to tell your parents, it's fine. You don't have to. You don't have to do anything. But I think at the same time, right, sometimes we are scared of monsters that don't really exist. And I would say that after I talked to my family about it, I was very grateful that I did, because before that I thought that I couldn't, or I was afraid of so many things. And when I did, what I realized was that, hey, you know what, at the core of it, like even if my family doesn't agree with me on everything, that they love me and they care about me. And I think that was a big one. Yeah. Sometime last year, I think November last year, I was like stopped at an MRT station, and it was very it's very like dramatic lah. Okay, I just say, then if it's like too long, then y'all can like cut it out. Okay, but I just say first, let y'all listen for fun. Okay, so I was basically I was at the library, and then when I got up to leave the library, there was this man who like he knocked into me, and then he cursed at me lah. So he just said some unsavory and threatening things, and I was very shocked. I wasn't sure whether he was talking to me because he just walked past me. And when I went out, he was outside and he was like saying these same things very loudly again, but he wasn't looking at me. He was like pretending to be on his phone. So I was very uncertain like what was going on, but just decided to keep walking. And on the way to the MRT station, he like at first he disappeared, then he suddenly ran past me and he like knocked into me and he ran across the road at the last minute. So that was like on the way to the MRT station. So when I got to the MRT station, right, I was super hyper paranoid because like I realized this guy has been following me. And so I was like kind of like looking everywhere for him, and I didn't know where he was, and I was just looking and looking and looking, and I was alone. And then I saw him like behind me, so I walked to the wall straight away, and I just stood there and I just looked at him to see what he would do. So at first he continued walking, but when he got like parallel to me, he took his phone out, then he walked towards me, he took a picture of me. And then I think because I had all that time to like be scared and process it, when he came and did that to me, I was like really angry, and I was like, what the heck? So I like followed him, and I was like, excuse me, like what are you doing? Why do you take a picture of me? And essentially he like changed direction rapidly and he walked away, and I decided I'm alone, this is not my battle to fight, I'm gonna go and report it, right? So I went to report it to like the what do you call it? The control station? That sounds like what you call the airport thing. The customer, you know lah, the desk at the MRT. Yeah.
I think it's control
I went to
station
report it.
or control station.
The control station.
I don't know. I
Sounds
feel
like
like
an airport.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I will call it the
And
control
like,
station.
I think
or
the
tap place.
ticketing office.
Yes.
Yeah, the ticketing office.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I went to report it there, and then like I opened my mouth and I said hi, and then I was like, well, I don't know what to say. So I was like, I'm here to report a case of harassment. Then like when I said that, right, I started crying, man. I really cried and I cried and I cried and I cried for like 3 hours. Like I cried non-stop for 3 hours, and it was very shocking to me because like when I started crying, it felt very out of control. I felt very like detached from the rest of my body, and I was like, hey, like why is this happening? And so this kind of like links to what I said earlier, right, about how if things happen to you and people keep pushing it aside and telling you and downsizing the impact of it, you never get to process your feelings, and so it comes out at a moment like that, right? I wasn't even aware like how strongly I was feeling about it, but when I opened my mouth and I said it, I think it was just like a complete build up of like having similar experiences, even if they were not so scary, that all like just accumulated in this moment where I felt really, really alone and really, really vulnerable. And when I opened my mouth and I admitted that, I couldn't help it. Like it was like a huge emotional release. So sorry, back to parents. Where parents come to the picture is because I made a police report. So I made a police report and I called my parents. I was like, hi dad, mom, I'm at the police station. And they were like, what? So I very briefly told them, and they came down. And after that, when we went home, I decided that I wanted it was either that day or the next day when I had calmed down. I decided that I wanted to have a conversation with them about it because it impacted me so greatly, right? That the next day, like I posted a series of like Instagram stories about it, just because I wanted people to know like what had happened and why it bothered me so much and how it was not okay. And it was insane. I got so many replies. Okay, like I got so many replies from people who were like, oh, I'm sorry this had to happen to you and so on. But I had so many replies from girls who had experienced like things that is very common to hear in response to this. People say, like that harassment meh? Like for example, so many stories about like weird creepy uncles on the MRT like staring at them or like following them at a distance, and then they're like scared, or like people just like wolf whistling, you know, or someone brushing past them and they're not sure whether it was like molest and they don't know, so they're uncertain, so they don't talk about it. But I think the fact that all these girls remember these things that they say they never talk about, it just really shows that it matters, you know, like even if you can put it aside mentally, it's somewhere like in your heart. And because of that, it's important to have these kinds of conversations that like normalize acknowledging the trauma that normalize acknowledging the trauma that arises from these experiences. Okay, sorry, I went into a huge circle. Okay, sorry, fast on, come back. Parents. So when I talked to my parents about it, right, they obviously knew that it was something that like mattered a lot to me because I was like crying for like 3 hours non-stop. So I was in a very vulnerable state when I talked to them about it, and I said that same thing that I said to you all, right? This thing about how like your small experiences, they add up, and I was talking about being catcalled. And then my dad, he was like, huh? You mean y'all get catcalled? My mom looked at him and he was like, yeah, what are you talking about? And I was like, ooh, he gets it. and okay, why I'm raising this, right, is just that everywhere in the world, including in your own family, there are people who are ignorant and there are people who have experiences that they don't talk about. And before you put somebody in a bucket where you're like, okay, they won't get it and I'm scared to open up to them, like give them a chance, give yourself a chance. You may find a really lovely connection and a huge source of support for the rest of your life.
So that's the end of part 1 of this episode. Stay tuned to the next one coming your way.